12, the Honourable Jim Anderton.
Mr. Speaker, when the government introduced my question to the Minister of Finance, Minister of Revenue. Sorry.
Thank you.
When the government introduced legislation to increase GST to 15% on the 1st of October 2010 and tax cuts to take effect from that date, was it the government's intention that increased costs would be matched by lower taxes and/or other forms of compensation?
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Peter Dunne.
Yes, and that is why the Budget 2010 tax package provided compensation to the vast majority of taxpayers for the price effects of the GST increase. For taxpayers, that was achieved through a cut in income tax rates. For those receiving main benefits and working for families tax credits and New Zealand superannuation, compensation was provided through increased entitlements. And I would suggest if anyone's in doubt about their entitlements, they should go to www.taxguide.gov.nz to see for themselves how they benefit from the budget tax package.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Jim Anderton.
Mr. Speaker, did the Minister or any of his ministerial colleagues advise state-owned trading enterprises that they had the ability to exercise flexibility over the rate of GST charged on goods and services provided during September and billed in early October, so that GST of 12.5% was added to invoice statements for that period rather than GST at the rate of 15%?
The Honourable Peter Dunne.
Mr. Speaker, this answer may take a little longer than usual, but it's a very important issue. And the short answer is yes, and in fact, based on a recommendation that we received from the GST Advisory Panel, the GST Act was amended to allow suppliers to issue invoices up until the 11th of October in respect of supplies made prior to the 1st of October, but to charge GST at the old rate. It's up to the supplier to elect to use the transitional concession, and in so doing they need to be aware that they would have to account for the GST earlier than if the invoice were dated on or after the 1st of October. Mr. Speaker, I've become aware in the last few days that some power and utility companies are not using the transitional provision, and that as a consequence customers are being charged the new rate of GST for services that were supplied during the month of September. My strong advice to them is to take that up directly with those supplying companies because, as I say, the Act was amended specifically to give a transitional arrangement that meant that those charges need not be made at that higher rate.
The Honourable Jim Anderton.
Mr. Speaker, is the government concerned to learn that the state-owned energy company Meridian has chosen to impose 15% GST on the power it supplied to its Christchurch customers during September, in one of the coldest months of the year, which also included a 7.1 earthquake and 1,300 to 1,400 aftershocks so far, rather than exercise the lawful flexibility it had to impose GST at 12.5%?
The Honourable Peter Dunne.
Mr. Speaker, yes, and the point that I made was that because that situation was predicted to be likely to occur, the Act was amended to ensure that there was a mechanism by which that additional charge could be avoided until the 11th of October. In the event that companies did not follow that, then I say it's for the people who have been adversely affected, and I've become aware of a number of them, to take that up directly with the companies concerned, because I'm aware of instances where those charges have been reversed.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, is the Minister aware that the overseas-owned Fairfax Media Company, owner of the Christchurch Press, decided to add GST at only 12.5% on invoice statements for services given up to September the 30th? And is he willing to take up with his ministerial colleagues of state-owned enterprises and finance why a state-owned enterprise, Meridian, chose not to do the same thing and charge people 15% for services rendered in September?
Mr. Speaker, there is a difference between the Fairfax case and the case the member refers to, simply because the Fairfax case relates to items that are supplied on particular days. But coming back to the point, the law was amended to ensure that there was a transitional provision. I am concerned if that transitional provision has not been acted upon, and I've indicated today that we'll be looking into it.
The Honourable Jim Anderton.
Mr. Speaker, is the Minister seriously suggesting to the House that electricity supplied in September was not supplied on particular days? Because I would have thought it definitely was. And the question then is, does this reflect well on the government that he supports, that Christchurch citizens have been subject to this rip-off by a state-owned enterprise energy company?
Mr. Speaker, the point that I was making in respect to newspapers was that the supply of a newspaper occurs at a particular time. You can't supply the same supply the same newspaper day after day. It is a different article. Power and other utility. Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, the Honourable Peter
The member
Dunne.
actually raises a serious question. I'm trying to give him the courtesy of a serious answer. I can't make myself heard over some of the din opposite.
The member's point is reasonable. I ask members to be more reasonable with the level of objection. The Honourable Peter Dunne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The point I was making was that the supply of a particular newspaper on a particular day constitutes a particular supply. Electricity and other utility services do not come into that category. That is why the law was amended to allow for that transitional provision. That is the point that I'm making. If companies have chosen not to exercise that provision, then it is for consumers who have been adversely affected to take that matter up directly with them.
That brings to a close Stuart Nash. My apologies.
That's okay, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister, regarding recent GST and income tax legislation, what does the Minister say to those in the Napier electorate when they ask why the 650 New Zealanders earning $1 million a year or more have just received a tax cut of $1,000 a week, whereas the 50% of Napier residents on or below the median wage get around $3 or less per week?
The Honourable Peter Dunne.
Mr. Speaker, what I say to the member and to the members of the Napier electorate and others who may have a similar view, that when you have a progressive tax system and you make changes based on the level of income that people pay, obviously those people that pay more will get a bigger cut and those people who pay less won't get as big a cut. But at the same time, Mr. Speaker, those people are also likely to be receiving other benefits, such as working for families, other entitlements that boost their income.
Point of order, the Honourable Jim Anderton.
Mr. Speaker, I seek leave to table a invoice from Meridian which shows they were charging 15% for electricity delivered in September of GST.
Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is no objection.
Point of order, Mr.
Point
Speaker.
of order, the Honourable Jim Anderton.
Mr. Speaker, I seek leave to table a document from the Consumer Institute which says that the IRD have issued special rules which enables energy companies particularly to charge their customers 12.5% for September services.
Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is no objection.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, the Honourable Jim Anderton.
I seek leave to submit a document from the Fairfax Media Publications which points out exactly the way in which they are only charging their customers for September services 12.5%.
For the House's benefit, can I inquire, is it a newspaper clipping or an actual administrative document?
No, it's an administrative document, Mr.
Administrative document. Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is no objection. That does bring to a close questions for oral answer.